The title of this podcast is Flexible Preference. Recently, I was reading The Mayo Clinic Guide to Stress-Free Living by Dr. Ahmed Sood. I've read it so many times from cover to cover, and I've done so because it's part of my daily well-being practice that started almost 10 years ago. The purpose of that practice is to keep me on a path in which I am every day using everything that shows up in life, situations and people to let go of my lower self so that I can show up as my best, which is loving, kind, and all my actions are informed by coming from a place of inner peace. So, one of the things that Dr. Sue talked about in this book was this idea of preference. And much of my suffering occurred in my life when I was Keith 1.0, which I can easily lapse back into at any time when I don't get my way. I can become like a five-year-old when I have these preferences and I become attached to them. That's when the 1.0 comes out. It's the attachment piece. So in reading Dr. Seuss's book, what I learned was during this reading, and like I said, I've read it so many times, but when you return back to a passage, if you've worked on yourself, the next time you read it through, there's a different, more conscious you that's reading it. So it resonates deeper. It's almost like you hit a shot, on the on the tennis court. The first time you hit it doesn't feel quite right because it's not natural for you. But after 10,000, forehands, it starts to feel different. And it feels more and more comfortable every time through. And you start to see the court and what your opponent might do completely different. The game slows down. And so what's happened with my well-being practice, the more and more I apply it, the game slows down. And it's not the game that's outside that I'm watching or playing, but it's a game inside because that's where the problem is. The world is what the world is. I have little to no control over that, but what happens inside, that's what I need to be conscious of and need to work on. And it's amazing how things in the outside world are not a problem until I make it a problem. And so this idea of preference for me is that when I became attached to an expectation in the form of how people should behave or treat me, or the things they should do or not do, or situations of how they should go or shouldn't go, when I became attached to that, that's where the suffering occurred. I want to be different than what it was. And the next step from that is trying to influence how a person acts, behaves, as well as trying to influence how situations are unfolding or how they turn out. What I found was the key to that is not to not is not to not have preferences. It's part of, I guess, the human condition or the human experience. I can like, warm food over cold food. The key is not to be attached to it. Eckhart Tolle tells this great story about soup. He says that he ordered warm soup, but they brought him cold soup. So the preference is to have warm soup. It's not a problem, and it's not a demerit on whether or not you grew or not by asking the server or reminding them that you ordered warm soup. But when the server comes back and says, "Hey, listen, I heard your order about warm soup. We only have cold soup." The wise person accepts that they only have cold soup. The person who isn't wise, or the person who's Keith 1.0, is the one who hears that they have warm soup and continues to suffer over that because it's not what you wanted. You're not accepting reality. And so what I've worked on is to accept what the reality is. And that's an inside job. And Dr. Sood has helped me see that it's okay to have preferences, but have flexible preferences. When I board the plane, I prefer to have the middle seat open so I can stretch out, get a little leg room. But if somebody sits in the middle seat, then that preference becomes flexible and I can accept that and let it go and not suffer over it. I prefer to get on the freeway and there not be traffic. But the times that I travel on the freeway, there's often traffic. So while that's a preference, if I can make it flexible, then traffic will not bother me at all. I can find a lot of other ways to enjoy that drive and the slow movement of traffic. So if you can take this concept of flexible preference and apply it to every area of your life, what you'll find is that you spend fewer moments in the grip of frustration, in the grip of disappointment, and the grip of suffering over unrealized expectations. The key is detaching. Another word for that is to be flexible. And I have become more and more flexible in my life. And I don't think this is a matter of getting older. It's a matter of becoming wiser, of being really committed to this journey of letting go of my lower self, the Keith 1.0, so that I can be conscious, so I can be Keith 2.0. And so I hope you will take this into not just this holiday season, but all seasons. Be flexible with your preferences, unattached.